The morning was cold and grey when Gorthak the Iron Jaw led his warriors through the valley. The land was quiet, too quiet for his liking. No birds, no wind, only the heavy sound of orc boots crushing the frozen grass. He was a warlord feared across 10 kingdoms, a giant with scars like battle maps on his green skin. His tusks gleamed under the weak sun as his red eyes scanned the land ahead. He was searching for humans, weak creatures who screamed easily and died fast. Or so he believed. The scouts had told him there was a small human camp nearby, maybe 100 soldiers at most. Gorthak expected an easy raid, something to amuse his warriors before the real battles began. But what he found that day would change him forever. As the warband marched forward, a strange sound began to echo through the valley. Thud, thud, thud. A steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of some giant beast. The orcs stopped. Gorthak raised his hand, signaling silence. Again, the sound came, heavy impacts, mixed with faint shouts carried by the wind. He frowned. Drums. One orc whispered. No, Gorthak muttered. Something else. Curiosity burned inside him. He left most of his warriors behind and climbed a nearby ridge with a few trusted guards. The climb was steep, and his armor scraped against the rocks, but he didn't care. He needed to see. When he reached the top, the warlord froze. Below, on the wide plain, humans were moving in perfect rows. Hundreds of them. They were not resting, not laughing, not feasting. They were training. Gorthak had seen many human armies before, ragged, scared, disorganized. But these humans were different. They shouted together, moved together, hit wooden dummies with such power that dust clouds rose. They lifted iron weights, sparred until their arms bled, and kept going even when they collapsed from exhaustion. The ground shook under their effort. Gorthak's eyes narrowed. They train as if war starts every sunrise, he said softly. His guards exchanged uneasy looks. One of them grunted, They look tired, Chief. Gorthak nodded. Tired, yes. But they do not stop. He had never seen such discipline. Orcs trained only when forced, and even then, it ended with drinking and fighting among themselves. But these humans, each one looked like he carried the fire of 100 battles inside. A man in dark armor stood before them, shouting commands. He wasn't using a whip or threats, yet every human obeyed instantly. His voice carried across the valley, Pain is weakness leaving your body. Again. Gorthak felt something strange twist in his chest. The words echoed in his head. He turned to his guard. Why do they speak of pain as if it's a friend? The guard shrugged. Humans are strange. Gorthak said nothing. His eyes stayed locked on the human commander. The man trained beside his soldiers, pushing himself harder than anyone. He fell, got up, and kept shouting encouragement. The warlord couldn't look away. Something about that man made his blood burn. This was no weakling king hiding behind walls. This was a leader who bled with his people. The orcs around him shifted nervously. Should we attack now, Chief? One asked. Gorthak shook his head slowly. No. Not yet. His instincts screamed that charging into that camp now would not be wise. He didn't understand why, but deep down, he knew these humans would not fall easily. They were not fighting anyone, yet they trained as if death was watching them from the shadows. Gorthak crouched lower, studying them for hours. He noticed how humans supported one another, shouting encouragement when one fell. He saw how their weapons were not decorated with gold, but well-worn and clean. Everything they did had purpose. No pride, no show, only survival. The warlord thought of his own army. Loud, strong, fearless, yes, but lazy after victory, and arrogant in their strength. The orcs believed being born powerful was enough. These humans proved otherwise. Gorthak's thoughts grew darker. He remembered his father's words from long ago, humans are weak. They break easy. But here, in front of him, humans were breaking themselves on purpose, and becoming stronger for it. The realization hit him like a hammer. Maybe strength was not something you were born with. Maybe it was something you built, piece by painful piece. He felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold air. His warriors started to grumble. Chief, this is madness. Why watch them? We can crush them before sunset. Gorthak turned his burning gaze toward them. And what if we can't? The question silenced them. Orcs were not used to hearing doubt from their leader. Gorthak looked back at the human camp. One soldier fell from exhaustion. Others rushed to lift him up. No one mocked him. They carried him to water and helped him stand again. They fight together, Gorthak whispered. Not for power, but for each other. He could not understand it, but he respected it. The sun began to sink, turning the valley gold. Still, the humans trained. Their shadows stretched long and dark, like the arms of some unstoppable force. Gorthak felt something he had not felt in years, unease. The sound of their training still echoed, thud, thud, thud. It sounded like the beating of a giant heart, the heart of humanity. Finally, he stood and turned away. "We leave," he ordered. His guards stared at him, confused. "Leave? We do not fight." Gorthak's voice was quiet but full of power. "Not yet. I want to know what drives them. Tomorrow, we send scouts. Watch them. Learn." His warriors obeyed, but whispers followed him down the ridge. Orcs did not watch. Orcs crushed. But their warlord was silent, lost in thought. As he walked through the darkening valley, the echo of human shouts haunted him. Pain is weakness leaving your body. He could not stop thinking about it. When he reached his camp, he stood alone by the fire, watching the sparks rise into the night. For the first time in his life, Gorthak the Ironjaw, warlord of 1,000 battles, felt something close to fear and respect. He had come to destroy humans. Instead, he had witnessed something greater, the power of those who refuse to stop, no matter the pain. And deep inside, a voice whispered, "Maybe that is what true strength looks like." The night after Gorthak first saw the human camp, the valley was covered in mist. Cold winds brushed across the grass, carrying the faint smell of smoke and sweat from the humans below. The orc warlord sat near a dying fire, staring into the flames as if they held answers. Around him, his warriors laughed and argued, sharpening blades and boasting about battles. But Gorthak stayed silent. His mind was still trapped in what he had seen that day, humans training like possessed creatures, each one pushing past exhaustion without complaint. It bothered him. It fascinated him. He finally turned to his second-in-command, a scarred orc named Drog. "At dawn," Gorthak said, "we send scouts. I want to know how they train, what they eat, how they live." Drog frowned, confused. "Chief, why waste time watching them? We are orcs. We take what we want." Gorthak's eyes glowed in the firelight. "And if we take death instead?" His voice was calm, but heavy. Drog said no more. Orcs didn't argue when their warlord spoke like that. So when the first light of dawn touched the horizon, scouts crawled down the ridge toward the human camp. They moved silently, like shadows between the rocks. Gorthak watched from above, hidden among the trees, his breath steady but his mind restless. Below, the human camp was already awake. Before the sun fully rose, hundreds of humans stood in lines again, stretching, shouting, and preparing. Gorthak felt his chest tighten. They did not sleep in, did not rest. They began their day with pain. The thudding sound started again, the sound of fists hitting wooden posts, boots pounding on dirt, weapons clashing in rhythm. The humans moved with unity. Each motion was precise, as if they were one body with many hearts. One of the scouts whispered, "They act like machines." Gorthak grunted softly. "No. Machines don't bleed. These do." He watched as one man stumbled, clutching his leg. Before he could fall, another soldier grabbed him, lifted him, and carried him to a healer. No anger, no mocking. Just teamwork. Gorthak had never seen such loyalty. Orcs fought beside each other, yes, but more out of fear of their warlord than love of their brothers. These humans, they fought because they believed in something. But what? Hours passed. Gorthak's eyes followed every movement. The human commander, Captain Reed, walked among his soldiers with a voice like thunder. "Again. Push harder. Every drop of sweat now saves blood later." His words hit Gorthak like arrows. He could almost feel the humans' hunger for improvement. They were building themselves into weapons. Not through birth or luck, but through pure will. "Chief," one of the scouts whispered, Why do they train so hard? There is no war near this valley. Gorthak did not answer at first. Then he said quietly, because they know war will come. It always comes. That realization struck him deeply. Orcs only trained when an enemy was close. Humans trained even in peace. Perhaps that was why humans survived everything the world threw at them. Perhaps that was why they had not vanished. Gorthak's sharp eyes caught something new, young humans, no older than children, training beside older ones. Small arms, shaking legs, but determination in every face. No one pitied them. Everyone encouraged them. Even their young are forged in fire, Gorthak murmured. The respect in his voice was clear. He remembered his own youth. He had grown strong by fighting beasts, not by discipline. His strength was raw, natural, but without order. Watching the humans, he began to wonder if maybe discipline was a weapon stronger than muscle. The sun climbed high, burning the mist away. The human camp shimmered with heat, but no one stopped. They lifted logs, ran across the field, swung swords until their arms trembled. Some vomited from exhaustion and then returned to training. Gorthak felt a strange pride for creatures not of his kind. He almost wanted to walk down there and tell them, "You fight like orcs should." Instead, he stayed hidden. At noon, the humans rested. Not to relax, but to eat in silence. Gorthak watched carefully. Their meals were small but organized. Each man received food, no one took more than his share. Even in rest, they followed rules. Then, to Gorthak's surprise, some began repairing weapons, cleaning armor, or helping the injured. No laziness. No bragging. They worked like a living army, disciplined even in calm. Strange creatures, Drog muttered. They act like they serve something greater. Gorthak nodded slowly. Maybe they do. He thought of the stories his elders told, how humans had no gods, no magic, only their will. And yet, here they stood, shaping that will into something terrifyingly powerful. Afternoon came. Gorthak's scouts returned silently to report. Their training is endless, one said. They rest only for a few breaths before returning to it. Another added, their commander fights harder than all of them. We saw him lift a fallen man and force him to continue. He said, "You fall, I fall." Gorthak closed his eyes. He fights beside them, not above them. That thought stayed in his mind. A leader who trains with his soldiers is a leader who earns loyalty stronger than fear. Could that be the true secret of their strength? As the day faded into dusk, Gorthak remained on the ridge, staring at the camp. The thudding rhythm returned as the humans began their evening drills. It was as if they were dancing with hardship, mastering it instead of running from it. Gorthak felt something stir in his chest, a quiet envy. His orcs were strong, but they lacked this fire. He realized with dread and awe that human strength was not physical alone. It came from within, from something no weapon could break. When darkness fell again, the humans lit torches and continued their training under the stars. Gorthak finally turned away. "We leave," he said. "We've seen enough." Drog hesitated. "What now, Chief?" Gorthak looked back one last time at the glowing human camp. "Now," he said slowly, "we learn." His voice was low, almost a growl, but there was something new in it, respect. That night, as the orcs marched back to their camp, Gorthak kept replaying everything he had witnessed. The sound of fists hitting wood. The unity. The pain turned into strength. The words of the human commander echoed in his head, "Every drop of sweat now saves blood later." Gorthak understood. These humans were not just training for war. They were training to become something greater, something unbreakable. And in that moment, under the silent stars, the mighty orc warlord realized that for the first time in his life, he was not the hunter watching prey. He was the student watching masters. The next morning, Gorthak the Iron Jaw woke before sunrise. The fire in his camp had burned to grey ash, and his warriors slept around it, snoring loudly. But the warlord's mind was far from rest. His thoughts were filled with the image of humans striking wooden dummies, their faces locked in grim focus, their leader shouting words that refused to leave Gorthak's head, "Pain is weakness leaving your body." He rose from his furs, his heavy armor clinking softly, and walked toward the edge of the camp. The valley below still slept, but the human camp was already stirring. Smoke from their fires rose in straight lines, and faint echoes of their morning drills reached his ears. They were training again, even before the sun had shown its face. Gorthak frowned. Orcs valued strength above all, but what he saw in those humans was something beyond strength. It was endurance, willpower, maybe even madness. He had always believed orcs were born powerful, that their muscles and rage made them the kings of battle. But now he was not so sure. What if strength could be built by those who were not born with it? What if that kind of strength was even greater? The thought disturbed him deeply. Drog, his second-in-command, approached, still half asleep. "Chief, you've been staring at the humans again," he grumbled. Gorthak didn't answer right away. He kept watching the distant shapes moving below. "Tell me, Drog," he finally said, "why do we train?" Drog blinked, confused. "To fight. To crush enemies. That's all." Gorthak nodded slowly. "And when there are no enemies?" Drog hesitated, scratching his thick beard. "Then we rest." Gorthak turned to him, his eyes glowing faintly red in the dawn light. "Humans do not rest. Even without war, they prepare." "Why?" Drog shrugged. "Because they fear." Gorthak almost smiled. "No. Because they remember." Drog tilted his head, not understanding. Gorthak looked back toward the camp. "They remember what weakness feels like. And they never want to feel it again." He spoke softly, but the words carried weight. Drog frowned. "You speak as if you admire them." Gorthak didn't deny it. "Maybe I do." Those words shocked Drog, but he dared not argue. The mighty warlord turned away from the valley and sat on a rock, resting his chin on his massive hands. Memories flooded his mind, his first battle, the way his father had thrown him into a pit with a wild beast and said, "Kill or die." He had survived, but not because of training or discipline. He had survived because of instinct. That was the orc way, strength through chaos. But the humans below, they sought strength through control. Gorthak realized something painful. Control might be stronger than chaos. He spent the whole morning in silence, watching, thinking, doubting. When his warriors awoke, they began their usual noisy routine, arguing, wrestling, showing off their muscles. They were powerful, but undisciplined. He saw them now with new eyes, and it disturbed him. "Strong bodies, weak minds," he muttered to himself. One of the warriors overheard him. "What was that, Chief?" Gorthak glared. "Nothing. Get ready." He could not show uncertainty. A warlord who doubted would lose the respect of his clan. Yet inside, a storm was brewing. He needed to test the truth. Were these humans really as strong as they appeared? Or was their discipline just an illusion? That night, as the moon climbed into the sky, Gorthak made a decision. He called Drog and 5 of his best warriors. They were his most silent killers, trained in ambush and assassination. "You will go to the human camp," he ordered. "Bring me one of their soldiers alive." Drog grinned. "Easy enough." Gorthak's voice was cold. "Do not kill unless you must. I want to see how they react." The 6 orcs vanished into the shadows, moving like predators through the night. Gorthak waited, pacing the camp like a caged beast. The wind whispered through the trees. He imagined his warriors sneaking into the human camp, grabbing some tired soldier, and returning quickly. But as the minutes turned into hours, unease grew in his chest. Then, suddenly, the sound reached him, distant horns echoing through the valley. A flare of light rose from the human camp. Gorthak froze. "They've been seen," he growled. He grabbed his axe and climbed the ridge to see what happened. Below, chaos danced in the torchlight, but it was not human chaos. The humans were moving in perfect order. Lines of soldiers formed instantly, surrounding the area where the orcs had entered. Alarms blared, but there was no panic. Humans moved with precision, like a living machine. Within minutes, the fight was over. Gorthak saw his 6 warriors being dragged out, captured, their weapons stripped away. One of them roared in fury, but the humans didn't even flinch. They tied him with ropes and continued their patrol as if it were routine. The warlord's eyes widened. His elite hunters, caught without killing a single human. Impossible. He clenched his fists, rage burning inside him, but also respect. They were ready even at night. They had expected an attack. They were waiting for us, he whispered. He stayed on the ridge until dawn, watching as the humans interrogated his captured warriors. No torture, no mockery. They questioned them, then treated their wounds. Gorthak was stunned. He had expected cruelty. Instead, he saw honor. He could not understand these creatures. They were strong yet kind, disciplined yet fierce. They feared death but faced it anyway. When his captured warriors were released the next day, beaten but alive, they fell before Gorthak in shame. "Forgive us, Chief," Drog said. "They knew we were coming. They set traps. We never stood a chance." Gorthak stared at him for a long moment. "And yet they spared you." Drog nodded slowly. "Yes, Chief." Their leader said, "Go back to your master. Tell him we are not prey." Gorthak's jaw tightened. The words struck deep. Not prey. The humans had seen through his arrogance. They had turned his test into a lesson. That night, as the fire crackled, Gorthak sat alone. Around him, the orcs whispered. They wanted revenge. But the warlord said nothing. His mind was heavy with doubt. Maybe the humans had something his kind had lost long ago, a purpose beyond conquest. He looked up at the stars and muttered, "They train not for war, but for survival." The wind carried his words away, but they stayed in his heart. For the first time in his life, Gorthak the Iron Jaw began to question everything he had been taught about strength. The night air was cold and sharp as Gorthak stood on the ridge, his red eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Below him, the human camp flickered with hundreds of torches, glowing like stars trapped in the valley. His warriors whispered behind him, angry and humiliated. The failed mission from the previous night had shaken the entire camp. Orcs were not used to failure, and the thought of being outsmarted by humans was like poison in their pride. Gorthak remained silent, staring into the distance. His mind replayed every detail, the ambush, the swift human reaction, the calm precision with which they had captured his best soldiers. His warriors were alive but broken inside, their confidence crushed more than their bodies. Even Drog, his most loyal second, refused to meet his eyes. The orcs wanted to storm the camp and erase their shame in blood, but Gorthak knew better. If they attacked blindly, they would lose again. That realization burned worse than any wound. Orcs were born to dominate, not to think like prey. Yet now, the great warlord felt something he had not felt since he was a young warrior, uncertainty. He gripped the edge of the cliff and muttered, "They were ready for us. They knew we were coming." Drog finally spoke, his voice thick with frustration. "Maybe a traitor warned them. Maybe the wind carried our scent." Gorthak shook his head. No. This was not luck. They were prepared. They train for war even when there is none. Their minds are sharper than our blades. His words silenced the camp. The orcs shifted uneasily. None of them wanted to believe humans could be cleverer or stronger. Gorthak turned and faced them, his massive frame towering over all. "You think strength is born in your blood," he growled. "But I have seen men with arms half your size break rocks with their fists because they refused to stop trying." He pointed toward the valley. "Those humans fight a battle before the battle even begins. That is why they won last night." The orcs grumbled, some in anger, others in shame. Drog stepped forward. "What do we do now, Chief?" Gorthak's jaw tightened. "We watch again. We learn." The next day, hidden behind the ridge, the orcs observed the human camp more carefully than ever. They expected fear or celebration, but what they saw stunned them. The humans did not rest or boast about capturing their enemies. Instead, they returned to training as if nothing had happened. Even the night patrols who had caught the orcs joined the drills at dawn. Their leader, Captain Reed, addressed the soldiers. "Complacency is death," he shouted. "Victory means nothing if we stop improving." Gorthak's chest tightened. The humans trained harder than before, pushing themselves beyond exhaustion. They were not proud of victory, they were hungry for perfection. "They're mad," one of the younger orcs whispered. Gorthak almost smiled. Madness that builds strength is wisdom. As the day went on, Gorthak saw something else. The humans had changed their camp layout overnight. New traps, new guard rotations, tighter formations. Every failure turned into improvement. It was as if their entire army learned like a living creature, adapting faster than any orc tribe ever could. Gorthak began to understand the truth. That is why they survive, he muttered. They learn faster than they fall. When night came again, Gorthak called a small council of his warriors. The fire between them cast red light across their scarred faces. We cannot fight them as we are, he said. We charge, they plan. We roar, they listen. They are not prey. They are hunters who wear patience as armor. Drog slammed his fist on the ground. Then what? Are we to hide forever like cowards? Gorthak's eyes flared. No. We wait, and we learn. We strike when we understand them fully. His tone was harsh, but his mind was calm. He needed to know how far human strength could go. That same night, he climbed the ridge again alone. He watched the humans train under torchlight, their shadows moving in unison, each strike timed perfectly. His heart thudded in his chest, not from fear but from awe. For the first time in his life, Gorthak felt respect for something other than brute force. When he returned to camp, he found Drog awake, sitting by the fire. The younger orc looked troubled. "Chief," Drog said quietly, "why didn't we fight them last night? We could have died with honor." Gorthak sat beside him. "Honor means nothing if it comes with ignorance. I've killed many foes, Drog, but none have taught me fear like these humans." Drog frowned. "Fear?" Gorthak nodded slowly. "Yes. Because they show me what we could become if we stopped relying only on our fists." He stared into the fire, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "They train their bodies, yes. But more than that, they train their spirits. Every swing, every fall, every drop of sweat, they are building something inside that we cannot see." Drog was silent. The idea that humans possessed a hidden kind of strength unsettled him. But deep inside, even he knew it was true. Days passed, and Gorthak continued to watch. He noticed how the humans rotated leadership. Each soldier commanded the others for a time, learning responsibility and discipline. No one was treated as less. Everyone mattered. Orcs had chiefs and slaves, but humans seemed to make soldiers out of everyone. One morning, as fog rolled across the valley, Gorthak saw Captain Reed again. The man was bleeding from a cut on his arm but ignored it, leading the soldiers in sword drills. Gorthak admired the sight. "He bleeds with them," the warlord whispered. "No orc leader would ever do that." That moment struck him deeply. Leadership through respect, not fear, was that the human's greatest weapon? Later that evening, Gorthak's warriors gathered near the campfire again. One of them spat angrily. "Chief, enough waiting. Let us attack. Show them the fury of orcs." Gorthak rose slowly, towering over them. "You wish to fight," he thundered. "Then tell me, are your minds ready, or just your muscles?" No one answered. "We fight them soon," he said at last, "but not like beasts. We fight as they do, with purpose." The orcs stared at him, uncertain whether their leader was losing his mind or discovering something greater. Gorthak looked toward the human camp one last time that night. "They've changed us already," he said quietly. "And they don't even know it." In his heart, the fire of doubt had turned into something new, a desire to understand, to evolve. He was still an orc, still a warlord, but now he was also something else, a student of humanity. And though his warriors didn't yet understand it, Gorthak knew the next battle would not be just a fight for victory. It would be a test, to see whose way of strength was truly supreme. The morning came with golden light breaking through the clouds, washing over the valley like a slow tide. Gorthak stood at the top of the ridge again, his arms crossed, the wind tugging at his dark cloak. Below him, the human camp moved with precision and order, a living organism made of countless moving parts. Every sound, every motion carried purpose. The clang of steel, the thud of boots, the shouts of command, all blended into one symphony of discipline. But today, Gorthak's eyes were fixed on one man. The human commander. Captain Reed. The one who had shouted words that refused to leave Gorthak's mind. The one who led not from behind, but from within. Reed was tall for a human, his body built from years of labor rather than luxury. His armor was scratched and battered, showing that he had fought countless times without ever replacing it. His voice was strong, carrying through the entire camp like rolling thunder. "Again!" he shouted, and the soldiers obeyed instantly. Gorthak watched as Reed sparred with his own men, taking hits and giving them back twice as hard. Sweat poured down his face, blood trickled from a split lip, but he never stopped. He corrected mistakes, encouraged the weak, punished the lazy, and carried fallen logs himself when others failed. Gorthak could not look away. It was strange to see a leader who lived the same struggle as his followers. Orc leaders demanded loyalty through fear and power. But this human earned loyalty through example. Drog, standing beside Gorthak, grunted. "He works like a slave. Shouldn't a leader command from the throne?" Gorthak shook his head slowly. "That man does not command from a throne. He commands from the heart." Drog snorted. "Humans are fools. He will die young." Gorthak glanced at him. "Maybe. But his soldiers will remember him for 10 lifetimes." They stood in silence, watching as Reed shouted encouragement to a soldier who had fallen. "On your feet. You don't stop until you're done." The soldier struggled up, trembling, but his comrades cheered for him. Gorthak felt something twist inside his chest. He had never seen such unity. Even in orc tribes, the weak were left behind, mocked, or crushed. Here, the weak were strengthened. The warlord turned his gaze to the sky. "They grow stronger because they refuse to let each other fall." Drog frowned. "That's weakness. Compassion dulls the blade." Gorthak growled softly. "No. It sharpens it." His mind drifted back to his father's teachings. Strength is born from pain, but only your own. Now he wondered if his father had been wrong. Maybe strength born from shared pain was greater. The more he watched, the more he saw layers in the human strength. They were not just fighters, they were thinkers, builders, teachers. When one soldier finished training, he helped the next. When a weapon broke, others repaired it together. Even their meals were organized, not chaotic like the orcs. They moved like a tribe that had learned to turn suffering into power. The humans reminded him of fire, small and fragile alone, but unstoppable when united. Gorthak could not deny the respect growing in his heart. But respect was dangerous for a warlord. His warriors were growing restless. They wanted blood, not lessons. The younger orcs whispered behind his back, calling him soft, saying the humans had cursed his mind. Gorthak ignored them, but their words cut deep. A leader could not show weakness, even when his strength was being rewritten inside him. One night, as the camp slept, Drog came to him again. "Chief, they call you a watcher, not a fighter," he said carefully. Gorthak's eyes glowed in the dim firelight. "And what do you call me, Drog?" Drog hesitated. "I call you wise, but wisdom won't feed our hunger." Gorthak smiled faintly, a rare thing. "Then perhaps it is time to feed them." The next day, Gorthak descended from the ridge with 100 warriors. The air was thick with tension. They stopped just beyond bow range of the human camp. The humans immediately formed ranks, shields up, spears ready. The ground vibrated as both forces stared at each other. Then Gorthak stepped forward alone. The humans parted to let Captain Reed through. The two leaders faced each other across the field, one a mountain of muscle and scars, the other a man forged by discipline and will. For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried only the sound of banners flapping. Then Gorthak's deep voice broke the silence. "You fight well, human. You train your soldiers harder than I've ever seen." Reed's eyes narrowed. "And you send assassins in the dark to test us." Gorthak did not flinch. "I wanted to see if the stories were true." Reed lifted his chin. "And now that you've seen." Gorthak's tusks glinted in the sun as he gave a grim smile. "Now I know you are worth fighting." Reed's lips curved slightly. "Then stop watching and fight." The challenge hung in the air like thunder. Gorthak raised his axe and roared, the sound shaking the valley. His warriors answered, their war cry echoing through the hills. The humans did not roar back. They simply tightened their ranks, shields overlapping perfectly. Gorthak felt the difference in that moment. Orcs fought with passion. Humans fought with purpose. When the battle began, it was chaos, steel clashing, dust rising, blood spraying into the air. Orcs charged like a storm, crushing everything in their path. But the humans held the line. Their discipline was unbreakable. Each time an orc smashed into their ranks, two humans pushed back together, covering each other's flanks. Gorthak fought at the front, swinging his axe in deadly arcs, but his respect for these humans only grew with every strike. In the middle of the chaos, he found himself face to face with Captain Reed. Their weapons met with a crash that echoed like thunder. Reed's blade cut deep into Gorthak's shoulder, but the orc only smiled. "You bleed too, Commander." Reed gritted his teeth. "That means I'm still alive." Their fight was brutal, both trading heavy blows, neither yielding. It was strength versus skill, rage versus focus. At one point, Gorthak disarmed Reed, but instead of killing him, he stepped back. "Stand, human. I want a true fight." Reed picked up his weapon, blood dripping from his arm, and nodded. "Then you'll have it." When the battle finally broke apart, both leaders stood wounded but alive. Neither had won. Neither had lost. Gorthak looked at Reed and said, "You have earned my respect." Reed lowered his sword, breathing hard. "And you, mine." The field around them was littered with the wounded from both sides, but no one moved to finish the fight. For the first time, orcs and humans stared at each other not as enemies, but as warriors who understood. Gorthak turned to his army. "Enough. We leave." The orcs obeyed without question. As they withdrew into the forest, Gorthak glanced back at Reed one last time. "You fight like the fire of your kind," he said quietly. "And that fire will change everything." Days passed after the battle, but the clash between Gorthak and Captain Reed haunted both sides like a lingering echo. The orcs had returned to their mountain stronghold, battered but alive. For the first time in years, Gorthak's warriors were silent. They had fought hard, spilled blood, yet they felt no triumph. The Warlord himself sat before the great fire in his stone hall, his axe laid across his knees. His shoulder wound ached, but his mind ached more. Around him, the chieftains argued. "We must strike again before the humans rebuild," one shouted. They were lucky, nothing more. Another banged his fist on the table. "Their walls are weak. Their numbers few." Gorthak said nothing. His yellow eyes were distant, replaying every moment of the battle, how the humans had moved, how they had refused to break. Finally, he raised his head. "We fought them once," he said quietly, his deep voice silencing the room. "And what did we learn?" The others looked confused. "That they bleed like any foe," one said. Gorthak shook his head. "No. We learned that they do not run. We learned they fight not for gold, not for glory, but for each other." The room fell still. Drog, sitting near the fire, frowned. "Are you saying we should fear them?" Gorthak leaned forward, his gaze fierce. "No. I say we should understand them." The others exchanged uneasy glances. Orcs did not seek understanding, they sought conquest. Yet something in their warlord's tone made them listen. "These humans," Gorthak continued, "are not weak. They are dangerous because they are united. We fight for power. They fight for purpose. And purpose is stronger than hunger." Drog's voice rumbled low. "You speak like one of them." Gorthak's tusks glinted as he smiled faintly. "Perhaps they taught me something worth knowing." That night, while the others drank and argued, Gorthak walked outside into the cold air. The mountains loomed like sleeping giants, and the moonlight painted silver across the snow. He looked down into the valley where the human camp still burned with torchlight. He imagined Captain Reed there, tending his wounded, rebuilding what was lost, training again without rest. Gorthak muttered under his breath, "You're not just a soldier, you're a builder of spirits." He did not know why those words came, but they felt true. The next morning, something strange happened. A small human scouting party was seen near the mountain border. The orcs captured them quickly, dragging them before Gorthak. His warriors expected him to execute them at once. But instead, he asked, "Why are you here?" The lead human, trembling but brave, answered, "Our commander sent us to retrieve our fallen, the ones from the battle. We mean no harm." The orcs growled angrily, but Gorthak raised his hand. You crossed into my land unarmed. The soldier nodded. Yes. Captain Reed said even enemies deserve their dead. The hall went silent. Gorthak studied the man's eyes. They were steady, unafraid. Take them, he ordered his guards, and show them the field. Let them collect their dead. His warriors roared in protest. Chief, they are our enemies, one shouted. They would never grant us the same mercy. Gorthak turned his burning gaze on him. Then let us be better than them. The orc fell silent, shamed. And so, under the watch of Gorthak's guards, the humans gathered their fallen and left peacefully. That night, Drog approached the warlord again. You're changing, Gorthak. The others whisper you've grown soft. Gorthak's jaw tightened. If wisdom is softness, then let them tremble before it. Drog frowned. You respect these humans too much. Gorthak rose, towering over him. Respect is not weakness. It is recognition of strength. Drog looked away, unsure how to respond. Gorthak continued, his voice low and heavy. If we destroy everything strong, we will be alone with our weakness. The following weeks brought uneasy calm. The humans did not attack, nor did the orcs. Scouts from both sides watched each other from afar but never struck. It was as if both armies were holding their breath. Then one morning, a horn echoed from the valley. A lone rider approached under a white flag. It was Captain Reed himself. Gorthak met him at the border, both surrounded by cautious guards. You risk much by coming here, the warlord said. Reed smiled slightly. So do you, by letting me. The two leaders stood facing each other again, not as enemies on a battlefield but as men who shared an understanding forged in combat. Reed's eyes were steady. I came to speak, not fight. Our nations have spilled enough blood. Gorthak nodded slowly. Then speak. Reed looked at him for a long moment before saying, You could have killed my men who came for our fallen. You didn't. Why? Gorthak's voice rumbled like thunder. Because the dead have no sides. Only the living create walls. Reed gave a faint nod of respect. You're wiser than most kings. Gorthak snorted. I am no king. Just a warrior trying to see beyond his blade. There was a long silence, filled only by the sound of the wind. Then Reed said, Our worlds will always clash. But maybe we can learn instead of burn. Gorthak tilted his head. You want peace. Reed shook his head. No. I want understanding. Peace is built on that. The warlord grunted softly. You speak like a shaman. Reed smiled. And you, like a philosopher. For a brief moment, both laughed, low and rough, but real. They spoke for hours about their people, their struggles, their beliefs. Gorthak learned that the humans trained not only for war but for survival, for rebuilding after loss. Reed learned that the orcs' brutality came from centuries of hunger and exile. Two enemies, both forged by pain, realized they were mirrors of each other. When Reed finally mounted his horse to leave, he said, If the day ever comes when our children fight, may they fight with honor, not hatred. Gorthak nodded. And if they meet as friends, tell them it began here. As Reed rode away, the orc watched him until he disappeared into the horizon. Drog approached quietly. Do you trust him? Gorthak's gaze remained fixed on the valley. No, he said softly, but I believe in what he stands for. That night, the warlord gathered his warriors and spoke. The humans are not weak. They are not our prey. They are our test. How we face them will decide whether we rise as legends or fall as beasts. His words rolled through the hall like thunder, shaking every orc to the bone. Even those who doubted him felt something awaken inside them, something new, something dangerous. Respect. And respect, Gorthak knew, was the beginning of change. Weeks passed in uneasy calm between the orcs and the humans. The battlefield where blood had once soaked the ground now stood silent, grass already beginning to grow over the scars of war. But peace was a fragile thing. Neither side truly trusted the other, and deep in both camps there were whispers of betrayal. Gorthak's warriors grew restless. They trained, hunted, and grumbled, their bloodlust simmering just beneath the surface. They had followed their warlord into countless victories, but now they saw hesitation in his eyes, and that frightened them more than any enemy. One night, as the fire roared inside the great stone hall, a loud voice rose among the orcs. "We are warriors, not watchers." It was Krug, one of Gorthak's fiercest generals. He stood tall and broad, scars crisscrossing his green skin like maps of battle. "We were born to conquer, not to talk." The hall erupted in roars of agreement. Gorthak sat in silence at the head of the table, his golden eyes glowing faintly through the smoke. Krug slammed his fist on the table. "The humans mock us with their peace. They sharpen their blades while we sit in the dark like old hounds." Gorthak's deep voice finally cut through the noise. "You think they mock us because we do not kill them?" Krug sneered. "I think they mock us because we have forgotten who we are." The room went quiet. Gorthak rose slowly, towering over everyone. His voice rumbled like thunder. "Do not mistake patience for weakness. I have seen their strength. I have seen what unity can do. They are not prey to be hunted, they are fire. Touch it carelessly, and you will burn." Krug's tusks bared in a snarl. "So we fear fire now?" Gorthak's gaze hardened. "No. We learn from it." But Krug was not done. He stepped closer. "Then maybe it's time for a new leader, one who remembers what it means to be orc." The hall filled with gasps and growls. Challenges like this could only end one way. Gorthak looked into Krug's eyes for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "If you crave blood so much, then take mine." The two warriors stepped into the fighting circle, surrounded by chanting orcs. The firelight flickered across their faces, painting them in red and gold. Krug roared and charged, swinging his axe in a deadly arc. Gorthak dodged, his movements sharp and controlled. The clash of their weapons echoed through the hall like thunder. Sparks flew, blood splashed, and still they fought, neither giving ground. Gorthak could feel the weight of every watching eye. He was not just fighting Krug, he was fighting for his tribe's soul. Krug's strength was brutal, his strikes wild with fury. But Gorthak had learned something from the humans: control. He waited for the right moment, then twisted aside and slammed his elbow into Krug's jaw. The general stumbled. Gorthak struck again, disarming him with a quick, precise motion. His axe blade stopped just short of Krug's throat. "Enough," he growled. Krug's chest heaved with rage. "Kill me and prove you're still orc." Gorthak's eyes burned like molten gold. "No. I will not kill a fool. I will let you live and learn." He turned his back and walked away, leaving Krug humiliated in front of the tribe. Some of the orcs cheered. Others muttered in anger. Gorthak felt the divide like a wound. That night, Drog approached him quietly. "You humiliated him. He will not forget." Gorthak nodded. "I know. But if I kill him, the others will see only strength. If I spare him, maybe they'll see reason." Drog frowned. "Or weakness." Gorthak looked at the fire, the flames dancing in his eyes. "Then let them test me again." In the human camp, Captain Reed faced his own troubles. The Council of Lords had summoned him, furious that he met with the Orc Warlord. "You speak of understanding with beasts," one shouted. "They've slaughtered our people for generations." Reed stood firm. "And we've done the same to them. Tell me, my lord, when does the killing end?" The room fell silent. The lords exchanged dark looks. "You are a soldier, Captain," another said coldly. "Your duty is to fight, not to think." Reed's jaw tightened. Then perhaps that is why wars never end. His defiance cost him. He was stripped of command and ordered to return to the capital. But Reed refused to leave. He stayed with his soldiers, the ones who trusted him, the ones who believed that even monsters could change. One night, under the pale moon, a messenger arrived at his camp, an orc scout, badly wounded. The men almost killed him on sight, but Reed stopped them. The orc fell to his knees, blood staining the dirt. "Krug," he gasped. "Krug leads the tribes, he marches to burn your valley." Reed's heart sank. "And Gorthak?" The orc's eyes dimmed. "He fights his own, to stop the war." Then he collapsed, dead. Reed stood in silence, the wind cold on his face. He knew what this meant. The peace both leaders had tried to build was breaking apart. At dawn, Reed gathered his men. "We face a storm," he told them. "But we will not run. If Gorthak still lives, he will hold the mountain. We'll hold the valley. And maybe, just maybe, we'll keep the fire from spreading." Meanwhile, in the mountains, Gorthak faced rebellion. Krug had fled after his defeat, gathering those who still craved war. The sky grew dark with smoke as orc banners rose once again. Drog entered the warlord's tent. His coming, Gorthak. With half-hour warriors. Gorthak strapped on his armor, his movements slow but steady. Then the other half must choose what kind of orcs they want to be. Drog looked at him with a mixture of fear and respect. "You'll fight your own blood." Gorthak's eyes were cold. "If blood stands in the way of honor, then yes." The mountain wind howled through the pass as the two armies met, orc against orc, brother against brother. The clash was worse than any human war. There was no glory, only madness. Gorthak cut through his enemies, not with joy but with sorrow. Each face he struck down was one he had once called kin. When he finally reached Krug, the traitor stood on a ridge, his axe raised high. "You have lost your soul." Krug roared. Gorthak's voice was thunder. "No, Krug. I found it." Their final duel was fierce and brutal. Krug fought with rage, Gorthak with purpose. When it ended, Krug lay broken on the rocks, blood pouring from his chest. Why didn't you just conquer?" he choked. Gorthak knelt beside him. "Because conquering everything leaves nothing left to lead." Krug's eyes dimmed as the life left him, and the battlefield grew silent. Gorthak stood alone, breathing heavily. Around him, orcs dropped their weapons. They looked at their warlord and saw something new, not fear, but respect. For the first time in generations, an orc had fought not for power, but for peace. Gorthak raised his axe high and shouted to the heavens, "The old ways die tonight." His cry echoed through the mountains, shaking the world itself. The battlefield was silent after Krug's death. Smoke drifted across the valley like ghosts of the fallen, and the cold wind carried the faint cries of the wounded. Gorthak stood in the middle of the carnage, his massive frame covered in blood and dust. His chest rose and fell heavily, but his eyes burned with something new, a fire not of destruction, but of awakening. Around him, orcs knelt one by one. They had seen their warlord fight his own kind not for greed, not for conquest, but for something greater. Drog approached slowly, his face grim but full of awe. "It's over," he said quietly. Gorthak looked over the shattered field, where brothers lay side by side, friend and foe indistinguishable in death. "No," he murmured. "It's only beginning." That night, under the dim light of the moon, Gorthak called what remained of his tribe together. The great fires burned low, their flames flickering as if listening. "We have fought each other," he said, his deep voice echoing off the mountain walls. "We have bled for nothing but pride and pain. But today, we saw what pride costs. Krug's blood is on this ground, but so is ours. The humans did not kill us. Our hate did." The orcs murmured among themselves. Some lowered their heads. Others stared in silence, their rage finally cooling into reflection. Drog stepped forward. "What now, Chief?" Gorthak turned his gaze toward the valley below, where the faint light of the human camp still glowed like embers. "Now," he said, "we build instead of burn." The words felt strange even to his own tongue, but they carried a weight that silenced the crowd. Our strength is not just in war. It's in unity, in loyalty, in the will to stand together. One young warrior shouted, "But the humans will never trust us." Gorthak nodded. "Then we will show them why they should. Not through words, but through actions." Days turned into weeks. The orcs buried their dead, repaired their homes, and began to rebuild. Gorthak forbade raids on human lands and ordered his hunters to stay within the mountain borders. It was not easy. Many resisted, but the warlord's presence kept them in line. His strength, tempered now by wisdom, had become something sacred. Meanwhile, Captain Reed in the valley received reports that stunned him. "The orcs have stopped raiding," his scouts said. "They guard their borders but attack no one." Reed listened with cautious hope. And their leader? Still alive, the scout replied. Gorthak rules the mountain. Reed's heart eased for the first time in months. Then maybe there's still a chance. Determined to find out, Reed gathered a small group of trusted soldiers and rode toward the mountain. He carried no banners, no weapons drawn, only a flag of peace. As they climbed the rocky path, orc sentries appeared above them, their bows drawn. Reed raised his hand. Tell your warlord Captain Reed seeks an audience. There was a tense pause, then the guards disappeared into the mist. Minutes later, a deep, familiar voice echoed through the cliffs. Let them pass. Gorthak stood waiting at the summit, taller and broader than Reed remembered, his armor patched and scarred, his eyes steady as stone. Reed dismounted and approached. I heard of your war, he said quietly. You fought your own kind. Gorthak nodded. I fought their hate. Reed looked around at the rebuilding camps, the smoke from the forge fires rising into the pale sky. You've changed your people. Gorthak gave a small, tired smile. No. They changed themselves. I just showed them what they could be. For a moment, the two warriors simply looked at each other, two leaders who had carried the weight of blood and loss and somehow survived it. You risked everything for peace, Reed said. Gorthak shook his head. Not peace. Understanding. Peace is a seed, it must be planted in both lands. Reed nodded slowly. Then let's plant it. Over the next days, the two camps sent envoys back and forth. They traded supplies, exchanged healers for the wounded, and even shared food. Suspicion still lingered, but curiosity began to grow stronger than fear. An orc blacksmith helped a human forge master repair a broken anvil. A human medic tended an injured orc child. Small things, almost invisible, but they mattered. Change rarely roars, it whispers. One evening, as the sun sank behind the mountains, Gorthak and Reed stood together on the ridge overlooking the valley. The light painted everything gold. Do you think they'll remember this day? Reed asked. Gorthak grunted softly. They'll remember the blood before they remember the peace. That is how it always begins. Reed smiled faintly. But maybe their children will remember the peace first. Gorthak looked at him with quiet respect. Then we have done our part. For months, the fragile alliance held. Humans and orcs began to trade quietly, exchanging grain or tools for hides. Not everyone approved. Some humans still called Gorthak a beast, and some orcs still called Reed a fool, but both leaders ignored the noise. They had seen too much to be blinded by hate again. Then one day, a storm rolled over the mountains. Torrents of rain flooded the valley, washing away roads and destroying farms. Reed's camp was hit hardest. Crops drowned, tents collapsed, and families shivered in the cold. When word reached the mountains, Gorthak made his decision without hesitation. Gather food. Gather timber. We go to them. Drog looked stunned. Help the humans. After all they've done. Gorthak's voice was calm but firm. If we let them fall, we prove Krug right, that mercy is weakness. I will not let his ghost win. And so, for the first time in history, orcs descended from the mountains not with war cries, but with aid. They carried food, blankets, and strong arms to rebuild what nature had destroyed. The humans stared in disbelief as orcs worked beside them, hauling wood, lifting beams, saving lives. Reed stood watching, soaked to the bone but smiling. When Gorthak approached, the human commander clasped his arm. You came. Gorthak's deep laugh rolled like thunder. You'd do the same. Reed nodded. Aye. And maybe one day, our people will too. By the time the storm ended, the valley was scarred but alive. The humans and orcs shared a feast that night, their fires glowing together under the same sky. Music rose from both camps, rough orc drums blending with human flutes. Laughter replaced fear. For the first time, the mountains and the valley were one. Later, as the moon rose high, Gorthak stood alone at the edge of the camp, looking out over the peaceful land. Drog joined him quietly. You were right, the old warrior said. About them. About everything. Gorthak's eyes were on the horizon. No, he said softly. I was only tired of being wrong. Drog chuckled. And what now, Chief? Gorthak smiled faintly. Now we guard this peace, the way we once guarded our rage. He turned toward the campfire, where orc and human children played together. Let them learn what we forgot. The wind carried the sound of laughter up the mountain, soft and clear. The warlord breathed deeply, feeling the world shift around him. The orc who once lived for battle now lived for balance. And in that quiet moment, beneath the same stars that had once watched him spill blood, Gorthak finally felt free.